The story begins with a young man taking his last breaths on the battlefield, hearing his enemies casually chatting about green tea. Suddenly, a jolt wakes him up. He looks around, stunned, as a radio announcement warns everyone to be cautious of the sun's rays. He slowly sits up, realizing it was all just a dream. What surprises him, though, is how vivid everything is, including the memory of losing his arm within the dream. A soldier from the bunk above hands him a piece of paper, asking him to sign it. Keiji takes it, still lost in thought, not wanting to die in a dream without ever making it to the real battlefield. Looking at the paper, he complains to his teammate that he's already signed it. Jin ignores his protest, urging him to sign quickly. Jin explains it's a confession for stealing liquor from the PX, and they'll use it to throw a party tonight. He adds that after the war, they'll submit the confession, signed by the man who will die in battle. While Jin's plan seems flawless, Keiji doesn't understand why they have to follow this tradition, especially when they're heading to the battlefield this afternoon. Jin leans down from the bunk and tells Keiji he's misunderstood. The party is tonight. But they leave tomorrow. Keiji is shocked. He clearly remembers deciding to stay behind for the attack, not to attend last night's party. Keiji's strange attitude made Jin worried. He said he understood Keiji's concern, since it would be his first time on the battlefield, but he needed to relax a bit. Keiji started to wonder if this was all just a dream, and now he was genuinely panicking. But as a cannoneer, preparing for his first battle tomorrow, he knew he had to stay calm. Humanity was locked in a brutal war, not against each other, but against the vile creatures known as mimics. No one knew where these monstrous beings came from or what they truly were, but one thing was certain. They were on a mission to wipe out humanity. Older generations compared this war to a sci-fi movie, but for him, it was just another Tuesday. The battle had been going on since he was a child. Mankind had created the defense forces to fight the mimics, but the long, exhausting war had drained everyone. He remembered hearing that the mimics had attacked Okinawa, and people around the world were slowly becoming prey to these horrifying creatures. Even Japan was under attack, with the battle centered at the Lower Peninsula base in Boso. Japan stood alone as the only industrialized nation capable of producing the composite armor needed for battlesuits. To protect this critical asset, the military had deployed a special unit, led by General Rita Vertasky, commander of the U.S. Special Forces. Rita's elite team was famous for their victories over the mimics, and he would fight alongside them in a legendary battle. But his thoughts were interrupted when Jin got out of bed and told him everything would be fine as long as he didn't shoot anyone from behind. Worrying too much would make things difficult. Jin continued, saying that those who made it out of the battle still sane were the weird ones, and that he needed to be like their sergeant, someone whose muscles were so developed that his brain had shrunk. Jin jumped when the sergeant suddenly whispered in his ear, asking if he wanted to train more. Standing up straight, Jin quickly greeted his sergeant, Bartolome Farrell, who demanded Jin repeat what he had just said about his mind. Jin fumbled, embarrassed, and answered that he was just talking to Keiji about his strong mindset. Ignoring him, Farrell turned to the others and announced that Unit 17 would gather at exactly 9 a.m. He instructed them to spread the word to everyone. The soldiers stood there, confused about what he had just said. Farrell shouted for them to repeat his orders, and they quickly complied. He then informed them that their unit would undergo a surprise inspection, and the inspection team had found several deficiencies in their equipment. Everyone was shocked by this news, but Farrell continued, undeterred, saying that the base commander was furious because the U.S. Special Forces were here. Jin protested, saying it wasn't their fault, and his teammates backed him up. Farrell responded that they should have been more careful and left without saying another word. The soldiers were left wondering what punishment awaited them, especially since they had to head into battle the next day. Keiji stepped forward and suggested it would definitely be physical training. Jin was surprised by his answer. And Keiji told him that he had seen this in his dream. They would have to do push-ups for 3 hours. His response shocked everyone, and they all hoped his dream wouldn't come true. By the end of the day, they were all forced to do push-ups, struggling to hold the position. Jin angrily muttered that his dream had indeed become reality. Keiji replied that it wasn't his fault. Everyone was thinking how strange it was that Keiji's dream had come true. The trainer yelled at them to count louder, and they silently cursed under their breath. A friend of Keiji's told him to look at where the U.S. Special Forces were standing. Keiji, sweating profusely, looked in the direction his friend pointed and recognized the world's best battlesuit soldier, Rita Vertasky. Jin also looked over and was shocked to see that Rita was much shorter than he had imagined. His friend replied, saying she was the metallic girl, someone who could easily wipe out any mimic, and warned Keiji not to judge women by their innocent looks. Keiji kept staring at Rita, thinking she looked more like a puppy than a dangerous person. Jin continued the conversation, mentioning that people said the US military unit was just propaganda to promote the use of new weapons and methods. Keiji asked if they were just for show. And Jin confirmed, saying that was why it made sense for a woman to be in command. Jin noticed Keiji's unwavering gaze fixed on Rita and teasingly asked if he liked her. Before Keiji could respond, he was startled when Rita looked directly at him, their eyes meeting by chance. He quickly turned away, but Rita began walking towards them, causing a wave of panic among the group. She silently passed by them, heading towards the trainers directing the session. After requesting permission to speak, Rita asked if she could join the training. The officer was taken aback by her request, and she explained that she had never had the chance to participate in this kind of training and wanted to join the soldiers to ensure the mission the next day would go smoothly. The officer agreed. And she turned back, standing right next to Keiji. Keiji felt nervous as Rita spoke up, asking if there was something wrong with her face because he kept staring at her. Keiji stammered, saying there was nothing wrong. Rita continued, saying it was strange for someone to look at her like that, and Keiji quickly apologized, insisting he didn't mean it for any special reason. Rita didn't say anything more, while Keiji secretly observed her, thinking she just looked like an ordinary girl. Before long, the training session ended, and as everyone was preparing to refresh themselves, Keiji breathed a sigh of relief when he realized the session had only lasted an hour instead of the 3 hours from his dream. At that moment, Jin approached Keiji excitedly, saying they would have a party tonight. But Keiji declined, not wanting to tell his friend that he wasn't feeling well and just wanted to stay in bed. Later, Keiji lay on his bed reading a book, feeling a bit confused since he had never read it before, yet the words seemed strangely familiar. He sat up and muttered to himself, wondering if Jin had told him this story before. However, his attention quickly shifted to the noise from his friends having their party in the next room. Keiji couldn't help but feel anxious about facing the mimics for the first time the next day, and he was also surprised to learn he would be fighting alongside Rita. Keiji made a plan to survive the battle, telling himself that it was just a dream, and no matter what happened, he wouldn't die tomorrow. The next morning, as everyone was getting ready to depart, the commander announced that they would be heading to Kotayushi Island. Everyone geared up, and the trainers continued to motivate them, emphasizing that they would reclaim the island. The commander added that if the mimics took Tokyo, the city would be destroyed in a few days. Right now, the soldiers had to save the lives of 35 million people. After reminding them that their families and friends were among those at risk, he urged them to crush the mimics into pieces. With the speech finished, they all moved forward with their weapons, determined to eliminate any mimic standing in their way. Keiji seemed to be struggling in the battle, so the sergeant told him to calm down, explaining that they only needed to handle the mimics that hadn't been taken out by the main forces. Keiji stammered in response, reminding himself that this was the real fight, and he needed to focus. Just then, the sergeant pointed ahead and announced that mimics were approaching. Keiji suddenly realized that this was the real battlefield. And he joined in, firing alongside his comrades. And soon, Keiji saw the mimics for the first time, a horde of monstrous creatures charging toward them. Jin shouted that the others were doing nothing, as there were still too many monsters. Jin told Keiji to move, saying that if they stayed there, they wouldn't last long. Jin quickly began moving, trying to make their escape. But before long, an explosion erupted, tearing him into pieces right before Keiji's eyes. In a panic, Keiji screamed for his friend, but when he turned around, the mimics were already there. Before he could escape, another explosion hit, ripping his arm apart. Keiji screamed in pain, his body racked with excruciating agony and searing burns, before collapsing flat onto the ground, fully aware that death was imminent. Then, in an instant, he woke up in bed, in the exact same position as before, his body completely intact. He shot up in panic, his mind racing to comprehend what was happening, trying to make sense of how he had ended up back here. Suddenly, Jin handed him a piece of paper and asked him to sign it. Keiji glanced at the paper quickly, his eyes widening in disbelief when he saw that it was the same request form as before. In that moment, memories of his brutal death on the battlefield flooded back, and he vomited from the overwhelming disgust. Jin looked down from his bunk, but Keiji couldn't focus on him. His mind was reeling, trying to process the impossible reality of what was unfolding around him. It felt too real to be a mere dream. He snapped out of his thoughts when Jin asked if he was feeling all right, since they would be heading out to battle the next day. The repetition of events was another shock to Keiji. He quickly opened the book he was reading, and as expected, he could clearly recall every detail of the scene in the book. But this shouldn't have been possible, since he couldn't dream about parts he hadn't read. With Keiji's strange behavior, Jin came down to check on him, but Keiji ignored him, busy trying to grasp the situation. Keiji remembered having the same dream in the morning, his arm being blown off, and he had died. Now, he realized he might not have dreamt it at all. Keiji felt crushed as he realized that if he stayed here, he'd be sent to battle and die again. Jin called his name, but Keiji didn't hear. Instead, he started running, desperately wanting to escape. He just wanted to go anywhere. Because staying meant facing that pain once more. While running, he didn't see the maid, Rachel, and collided with her, knocking her to the ground, scattering vegetables everywhere. Keiji hit his head on the ground in the fall, but he ignored the injury, even as Rachel pointed out the blood. He apologized to her and prepared to run again, but had to stop when the sergeant appeared and asked if he'd bumped into the cart. Keiji admitted it, and when the sergeant tried to check his wound, Keiji brushed his hand away, saying he was fine. The sergeant then told him he could skip physical training and ordered him to go to the medical station. Farrell went to the barracks to talk to the other soldiers, while Keiji seized the opportunity and ran. He managed to escape the base, feeling a strange satisfaction with his decision. Because if he stayed, he would die. He easily bypassed the guards, since their job was to stop suspicious individuals from approaching the base, not to pay attention to young soldiers. Desperate to escape death, he kept running down the empty road, hoping to reach a nearby town, where he could go anywhere else. He stopped when he saw an old man and a child coming toward him. The man remarked how rare it was to see soldiers here, surprising Keiji. Keiji was equally surprised to see civilians, but remained silent as the old man explained that his granddaughter kept talking about the strange color of the sea, so he came to see if something was wrong. Keiji finally felt relief, realizing he'd actually left the base and was now in a secure, high-defense zone. Safe at last. But just as he thought this, something struck the old man, severing his head right before Keiji's eyes. Stunned, Keiji watched the blood pour from the man's neck. The girl looked up at him, only for another lightning bolt to strike, killing her in the same way. Keiji turned, pain coursing through him, only to spot a mimic nearby. He froze in shock, a mimic, all alone in the secure zone. He tried to run, but another lightning bolt hit, blowing his legs off. And once again, he died. The same radio news playing in the background. Keiji woke in his familiar bed. Jin handed him a petition form. Keiji sat up, head low, then asked Jin if he had a gun. Jin, taken aback by Keiji's sudden interest in weapons, handed him a gun, warning him to be careful. It was fully loaded. He added that Keiji would get one when he promoted to corporal, but reminded him that the gun wouldn't be much use against mimics. Suddenly, Jin's eyes widened in disbelief as Keiji aimed the gun at his mouth and pulled the trigger. Keiji died again. As expected, he woke up in the same situation. This time, he just lay there, finally realizing that no matter how he died, time repeated itself, bringing him back to this day with his memories fully intact. Keiji didn't understand why this was happening in this world. He turned to Jin, asking what would happen if everything kept repeating like this. Jin, confused by the question, was soon enlightened when Keiji explained it was like restarting from the beginning in a board game. Finally understanding, Jin answered that it depended on what was happening in those repeating events. He emphasized that he would never want to relive the Okinawa landing campaign, even if his life was on the line. Keiji didn't reply, quietly reflecting on the fact that if he was dragged before the execution squad, he'd still come back like this. He wondered what his friends would think if they knew, since clearly, he was the only one trapped in the loop, facing the horror of death every day. A sudden surge of determination filled him. He told himself he would survive. If this was the only way to take revenge on this world, he would fight to the end. Sitting up on his bed, Keiji began to keep a record of how many times he had died, marking the number 5 on his hand. For him, this small number was the starting point of his battle against fate. He remembered when he was younger, playing hero fighting aliens. In the group, Keiji always took the role of the heroic sacrifice, rushing to face the enemy, taking all the hits, to encourage the others to keep fighting and win. Back then, it was just a childish game, centered around the idea of death. But now, after experiencing death and rebirth 4 times, Keiji understood that death was nothing like the game. It was incredibly painful, and he didn't want to be the hero in this battle. He was determined not to keep dying and coming back. While doing push-ups, his only goal was to survive the upcoming battle. But he still didn't know how to do that, especially when facing the brutal mimics. His thoughts were interrupted when Jin nudged him to look beside him, where the American military forces stood. Keiji's gaze followed Rita, the soldier in the strongest armor. Jin commented that she was just an advertising symbol, but Keiji knew that was a lie. He remembered the first time he died. The moment he thought it was just a dream. He had seen Rita fight back then. She wielded a massive axe, fighting fiercely and annihilating the mimics without mercy. Keiji recalled the outfit Rita wore that day and a vague conversation still lingering in his mind. As he lay dying, Rita had suddenly asked if the green tea served at the end of a Japanese meal was free. He had tried to answer, but couldn't, and she continued, saying she'd once gotten in trouble for believing everything she read in books. Rita explained she had read about Japanese culture, and now she wanted to hear from a local. Then, she encouraged Keiji to take a deep breath, but instead of following her advice, he blurted out, asking if he was going to die here. Rita answered bluntly, "Yes, you will die." After introducing herself, she reassured him that she would stay with him until his last breath. Keiji's eyes turned pale with despair, as Rita went on to say that when he passed, she would remove the battery from his armor, and urged him to let go, rather than fight against death. At that moment, the sound from a radio blared, with other soldiers announcing that Alpha area was secured and they were about to receive pizza. Keiji was confused, hearing them talk about pizza in this situation. But he didn't have time to make sense of it. As a group of mimics suddenly attacked, Rita immediately grabbed her weapon, ordering Keiji to stay still as she rushed to face the mimics. With her giant axe, she chopped through the mimics swiftly, astonishing Keiji with her speed and strength. While Rita fought, Keiji, still terrified, began to move slowly. He told himself that before he died, he at least had to kill one mimic to prove his worth. Keiji tried to stand up and managed to kill one mimic, but was immediately struck by another attack, facing death once again. Back in the present, he recalled Rita's strength and understood why she could survive every battle. As for him, all he had managed to do was kill one mimic before dying. Jin snapped him out of his thoughts, commenting that Rita was just there to make them feel useless. Keiji was confused by this, remembering that she was supposed to be in training and standing right beside him. But things had turned out differently. Keiji realized the difference came from the fact that he hadn't stared at her like before. This discovery made him understand that he could change events in the future. As Keiji returned to the barracks, he reflected on the exhausting 3-hour training session he had just endured. But this time, he silently decided that he wouldn't let things repeat like that again. Keiji made a plan to get closer to Rita, hoping to convince her to shorten the training to just 1 hour. At the same time, he recognized that, even though he was stuck in a time loop, he was still just a weak rookie. Thinking about how to become stronger, Keiji glanced around and saw his teammates playing chess. One of them was complaining to Jin about constantly losing, even suggesting that he should play with his eyes closed. Jin only laughed, saying he preferred to follow his instincts. However, he was reminded that if a rookie did that, they would never win. Keiji listened carefully as another player explained the importance of changing tactics and studying every move of the opponent. "It's like a secret code that anyone can decipher with regular practice," the player said. These words awakened a new realization in Keiji. To survive on the battlefield, he needed to improve his combat skills. Determined to act immediately, Keiji stood up and went in search of Sergeant Farrell. Keiji knew that Farrell had been at the base the longest and was the most experienced soldier, the one who had survived longer than anyone else. When Keiji didn't speak, Farrell asked if he was worried because they would be heading into battle the next day. Keiji thought about how Farrell had been his trainer, and how he was the only one who could help him. Finally breaking the silence, he asked Farrell if he could join in the training, since he still maintained his practice sessions. Farrell replied that it would be pointless, but when he saw the puzzled look on Keiji's face, he changed his mind. He quoted an old saying, "Defeat the enemy and learn." He explained that a skilled swordsman, one who had killed countless enemies in many battles, should continue to kill. Experience was the only true way to learn. He concluded that soldiers who survived the battlefield would learn from it. Keiji smiled faintly, thinking about how he had all the time in the world to fight in these battles. Farrell found it odd to see Keiji smile, and Keiji quickly apologized to him, while thinking about being trapped in a time loop. He realized that he could train himself by engaging in these repeated battles, since he had endless time. Keiji was confident that if he continued to train, one day he would reach a level like Rita and those legendary swordsmen. Farrell still found Keiji's smile and expression strange, but he told him to come back in 15 minutes, wearing his level 1 gear. A bit confused, Keiji asked if he really needed to wear it. Farrell snapped at him, saying a soldier can't train without gear. Keiji realized he was stuck in a time loop after his first battle. After some trial and error, he came up with a few rules for the loop. Rule 1. When he dies, he goes back a day before the battle. No matter where he dies, the rule never changes. He can't escape this loop. No matter how many times he dies, the loop keeps going. He remembers everything. Rule 2. The future can change, but only if he's strong enough to break the cycle. To escape this loop, he must be strong enough to defeat death. And to do that, he needs to improve his combat skills. Until now, he's just been a rookie. But everything changed once he began waking up after each death. Now, In the 12th loop, he runs fearlessly on the battlefield. His teammates worry he'll get killed if he keeps charging forward like this. But Keiji doesn't care. He knows running is more important than dying. When he started training with Sergeant Farrell, the first thing he learned was how to move in his armor. Farrell told him to turn off the automatic balance system, which confused Keiji, since it helped him stand upright. Farrell explained it would slow him down slightly, and Keiji understood. This small delay could mean death on the battlefield. After that training, he ran on the battlefield and died 7 times. Now, in the 12th loop, he can run without obstacles. Even though he runs fast, he's still surrounded by mimics and dies. When he enters the next loop, his goal is to learn how to attack. He recalls how soldiers in armor were given various weapons, starting with the 20mm gun. It's powerful enough to tear a man apart, but useless against mimics. Missiles and fuel grenades have no effect either. The only weapon that works against mimics is the drill, which shoots tungsten carbide alloy rounds. After deciding on his weapon, Keiji heads to the med bay, telling the guards he wants to use his armor for training. The guard was surprised by Keiji's request and suggested he should rest since the battle was the next day. But when Keiji insisted, the guard argued that if he wanted to use the pile driver gun, he'd have to get close to the mimics. Keiji wasn't disgusted by the idea of getting close to them, and as he returned to the battlefield, he spotted a lone mimic, the perfect target. He moved quietly, determined to get closer. But just as he was about to take aim, the mimic shot a lightning bolt straight at his face. Keiji jolted awake in his bed, startling Jin, who rushed over to check if he was okay. Keiji didn't answer, keeping calm as he reminded himself, fear has no place here. Death is his ally. He kept training to kill mimics. And with each attempt, his excitement grew. Finally, in the 21st loop, he managed to take one down. His first kill gave him a wave of new motivation. And he was more determined than ever to get stronger. To kill more mimics. His thoughts snapped back to the present. When he saw Jin struggling to hold his ground against a mimic, Keiji acted quickly, using the pile driver gun to eliminate the mimic. Jin was shocked by the sight of Keiji fighting like this, but Keiji didn't pay him any mind. He ran off, warning Jin to be careful. More mimics were coming from the east. The other soldiers stood frozen, whispering in disbelief at how powerful Keiji had become. With his weapon in hand, Keiji pressed forward, thinking about how he had become strong enough to impress even Sergeant Farrell. Despite his strength, Keiji kept dying over and over, and he knew the reason for it. In the 47th loop, Keiji knelt behind a bush near the armory, noticing the familiar guards with their M16 rifles. Keiji was searching for something. The pile driver gun wasn't effective enough. It only had 20 rounds, which meant he could only take down a limited number of mimics. Every time he died, it was because he ran out of bullets, and he needed a weapon with no limits. To get that, he needed to meet the person in the armory. Just as the company commander's vehicle, which he had been waiting for, appeared, Keiji repeated the chain of events that were about to unfold. In his mind, he knew when the guards would salute the commander, then he could make his move. The vehicle would turn toward the intersection, and at the same time, the janitor would come out from around the corner. The guards would glance at the vehicle, and that would be his chance to slip past them. One of the guards would turn back to look at him, but his view would be blocked by the larger guard next to him. Following the usual sequence of events, Keiji easily slipped into the armory and found a girl working with weapons. When Keiji greeted her, she jumped in surprise at the sound of his voice and accidentally dropped her glasses. He helped her put them back on. And as she stood up, she introduced herself as Shasta Rail. Keiji responded, saying he knew her, and that was exactly why he was there to see her. Shasta tried to turn him away, thinking he wanted something else, but Keiji quickly pointed to a weapon and said, "I want that." She was confused by his request, until Keiji clarified that he wanted a battle axe, just like Rita's. He was tired of running out of ammo and needed a weapon that wouldn't run dry on the battlefield. Shasta couldn't believe he actually wanted the axe. But when Keiji reassured her, she bluntly refused, citing her current work and her inability to make a weapon on the spot. Unfazed, Keiji nodded quietly, admiring her achievements. She was the top lieutenant, a tech genius who had graduated from MIT at a young age. She was Rita's personal technician, so meeting her was no easy feat. Keiji suddenly pulled a memory chip from his pocket and asked Shasta if she needed it. She tried to snatch it from his hand, but he quickly raised his hand above his head, keeping it out of her reach. Desperate, Shasta begged him to give it to her. And Keiji agreed, on the condition that she make him a battle axe. Shasta stopped trying to grab it and politely told him that he would get hurt if he tried to imitate Rita, as she was the only one who could wield such a weapon. She explained that the axe weighed 200 kilograms. and the momentum from swinging such a heavy weapon would damage his body. Shasta continued, saying Rita didn't use an automatic balancing system with her weapon, because she focused on every tiny step she took. She revealed that Rita's coat didn't even have the balancing system, and only Rita herself could manage it, even in the special forces. Despite the warning, Keiji calmly said that removing the balancing system sounded like a good idea, and mentioned that he didn't use one either. Shasta sharply asked if he was trying to become Rita's successor, adding that Rita didn't care about what others thought of her. She recalled the first time they met, when Rita had told her she was happy to live in this age of war. Shasta then asked Keiji if he could say the same, but suddenly realized something, and quickly added that she wasn't afraid of Rita. She tried to say something else, but Keiji stopped her, saying he knew Rita wasn't as cold as people made her out to be. He went on, explaining that he didn't want the axe because of Rita, but because he needed a weapon that wouldn't run out of ammo like a pile driver gun, especially when Keiji said he'd be fine with a spear or sword. This caught Shasta's attention, as long as it was a weapon that would help him survive the battle. Shasta was surprised by his strange statement, and she realized that Rita might have said something similar. Keiji humbly accepted being compared to Rita, promising Shasta repeatedly that he had the weapon situation under control. But just as Shasta started to panic, she snatched the chip from his hand and rushed off to craft a temporary weapon from spare steel scraps. While working on the weapon, Shasta remarked that Keiji was the only one who knew the gap between him and Rita, and still wanted to bridge it. Remembering something, she asked about the number written on his hand. Her question surprised Keiji, and he finally answered that it was like marking a date on a calendar. Shasta commented that it must be important if he wrote it on his hand, then asked if it was his girlfriend's birthday. He denied it, explaining that it was the number of days since his last death. Keiji felt a sense of relief when he finally got his battle axe, and while he might die using it, the important thing was that the mimics could be shattered with just one swing of this axe. Keiji swung the axe around, effortlessly taking down the mimics, but his reckless actions cost Sergeant Farrell his life. He kept returning to that day, now living the same routine every day. From waking up at 6 a.m. to going to sleep, everything was the same except for training. Now, he could even track the schedule while asleep. The onion soup in the mess hall always spilled on him in the same way. Now, sitting back at the table with his bowl of soup, he overheard some soldiers praising it in front of Chef Rachel. At first, Keiji had thought the soup was good, but after eating it for 80 days straight, he had grown tired of it and only ate for the energy, accompanied by a headache. Keiji lifted his head when he heard soldiers talking about Rita entering the mess hall. Without looking at the clock, he knew it was 11:40. As usual, Rita was eating lunch a few tables away. Every day, he watched her eat. Though he hadn't consciously chosen to do so, it had just become routine. He had memorized the events, knowing exactly when Rita would struggle to pick up a single pea, and when she would eat a salted apricot. He stared at her back, thinking about how childlike she acted despite being 22. Telling himself that she would look adorable in casual clothes. He was startled when another burly soldier walked up to him and sharply asked if he was enjoying his meal. Keiji calmly replied, "It's normal to enjoy a meal when there are good people around." While silently thinking that this was the first time someone had tried to pick a fight with him, the soldier yelled that Keiji looked like he was eating something disgusting, and the food was the only interesting thing here. But Keiji's expression was downright terrifying. He remained silent as the soldiers dragged him to his feet, causing his soup to spill over. Rachel quickly rushed over, shouting for them to stop, and telling the soldier that he had crossed the line. He released Keiji and told Rachel that she was the one who had said Keiji looked so sad while eating. Listening to the argument, Keiji looked at his reflection in the plate and was surprised to see just how pitiful he appeared. Trying to defuse the situation, Rachel offered Keiji a shrimp. But the soldier shoved her hand away and dragged Keiji back, saying he still had to deal with him. When the soldier lunged to attack, Keiji quickly dodged to the side, causing the soldier to crash into the chairs. Keiji calmly handed the shrimp back to Rachel. The soldier immediately stood up, and other soldiers cheered them on to fight. He charged again, trying to punch Keiji, but the blow had no effect. Keiji moved with calm precision, thinking about how those who failed to appreciate every moment would never reach his level. Jin and his friends bet on Keiji winning, but Keiji continued to remember Farrell's words, that he must analyze every second with precision, because time couldn't be extended. Instead, each moment must be carved into valuable fragments. Keiji was confident that he could prepare himself by predicting what would happen next, easily turning the tide in his favor. He kept moving, dodging each blow from the burly soldier, who grew more frustrated with every missed punch. After carefully observing his opponent's movements, Keiji knew the soldier would throw a left hook, a blow Keiji easily avoided by simply tilting his torso. Looking at the soldier, Keiji could spot all the weak points he could strike, but the soldier remained unaware of Keiji's strength. After dodging another punch, Keiji's friends encouraged him to counterattack, but Keiji realized that if he won this fight, the soldier would continue to pursue him, which would interfere with his training. He decided to take the punch. And just as Rachel tried to step in between them, Keiji was struck in the face and fell to the ground. His friends quickly gathered around, groaning about losing their bets. Meanwhile, Rita stood up from her table, shocking everyone by praising Keiji's moves. When Keiji came to, he saw Rachel standing next to him, asking if he was all right as his eye swelled. He slowly sat up and told her he was fine. Rachel looked relieved that he was okay and apologized on behalf of the burly soldier, saying he wasn't really that bad. Keiji quickly responded that he was the one who should apologize, then asked if she really thought he looked like he was attending a funeral during lunch. Rachel honestly replied that he did, which made Keiji think back to his previous loop. Sergeant Farrell had died because of his own selfish actions. For Keiji, it truly felt like a funeral. However, he didn't voice this and simply said he'd try not to make the same mistake again. He was surprised when Rachel asked why he hadn't fought back, pointing out that he clearly had the upper hand but hadn't used his full strength. Keiji calmly responded that he was saving his energy for the real battle. Suddenly changing the subject, Rachel asked if he was seeing anyone. And when he denied it, she suggested that she could stay with him tonight since he'd be going into battle tomorrow. She quickly added that she hadn't made such an offer to anyone else, but Keiji declined, saying he wasn't the kind of person she was looking for. He then said he needed to practice and ran off, leaving Rachel sitting there. As he ran, Keiji couldn't stop thinking about Rachel, how she reminded him of a librarian. He had secretly liked her back in high school. Back then, he had been left in a terrible state, but that had nothing to do with him joining the Federal Defense Force. He liked to think of himself as not being the pathetic man who couldn't express his feeling. Keiji continued running, charging into the training room, where Sergeant Farrell was repeating his familiar lines. Keiji was relieved to see him still alive, and he remembered the words of the librarian from back then. "We only live once, and if that was the case for me, I'd choose to stay with Rachel for the night." He asked Farrell loudly if he could train with him, accepting that this was his life now. In Loop 99, he died 45 minutes after the battle began. In Loop 110, he realized that Jin was the weak link in their formation, which helped him figure out how to break the deadlock. In Loop 123, his headache, which had started in the 5th loop, only grew worse, but he kept pushing forward with deadly strikes. As the loops continued, he managed to survive longer on the battlefield. He realized that he had lost consciousness 8 minutes into the battle, and though he didn't die, time kept repeating, and Keiji could only accept his fate. In Loop 158, Keiji was like the wind, cutting through the mimics, leaving his teammates in awe of his movements. Jin commented that he thought Keiji had only picked up the axe for fun. Sergeant Farrell directed everyone that from now on, 17th Company would support Keiji, and ordered that no one disturb him while he fought the mimics. Everyone followed his orders, and Keiji announced to Farrell that he would head into battle, thinking to himself that he was no longer the weak soldier he used to be. Keiji had become a machine, fueled by blood instead of oil, a soldier who could control every aspect of the war with his will. He leapt through the air, cutting down any mimic that dared to stand in his way, leaving the American base unit stunned. When they discovered that the Japanese unit was approaching Alpha Server from the north, they were caught off guard. But Keiji pressed forward, undeterred. As he advanced across the battlefield, he noticed a soldier lying on the ground, a shard of metal embedded in his shoulder. To distract the soldier, Keiji asked him if he remembered the rugby match a few months ago between their units and how they lost. The soldier was surprised by the strange, unrelated question, but Keiji continued, mentioning that it had been a record in the internal match. Keiji then admitted that he didn't want to talk like this, but stopped himself before saying something else. Instead, he suggested the soldier take a deep breath. The soldier, confused by Keiji's odd questions, saw that he was speaking normally now. Keiji helped him to his feet and said that he owed the soldier a favor. The soldier remarked that Keiji was rude, but Keiji just smiled and said, "They can only hope we get lucky." With that, Keiji ran back toward the battlefield, recalling the first time he had nearly died. Back then, Rita had kept him calm with her meaningless chatter about green tea. Suddenly, an explosion went off just meters from him, and Keiji immediately knew Rita was nearby. Because every time she appeared, there was always an explosion that wiped out everything around. As he predicted, Rita emerged from the smoke, declaring that the area was cleared. Keiji realized the soldiers had placed their hopes in her when they saw Rita in her familiar red coat, and it seemed they had fallen for her. He now understood why they had given her the nickname Full Metal Bitch, a sign of respect. He admitted to himself that he was also starting to develop feelings for Rita, but fortunately, those feelings were one-sided. Keiji wasn't in a position for love. Even if he could feel something, any time spent with someone would be lost as soon as he entered another time loop. Just then, a mimic appeared in front of them, and Keiji was surprised to recognize it. Somehow, he knew this mimic was the one that had killed him. For the first time, Keiji felt a flicker of excitement as he faced the creature. Now, he had the power to show it just how much he had grown. Suddenly, a voice crackled through the radio, and Keiji's eyes widened as he realized it was Rita's voice. Seeing the surprised expression on his face, Rita confirmed she was speaking to him, then asked how many loops he had been through. Illinois was a small town with a population of around 4,000, and it had a wide, beautiful sky. This was where Rita had spent her childhood, with average grades in middle school, a strong dislike for green peppers, and a talent for playing horseshoe toss. One day, while working on the field with her father, she looked a little down, which made her father concerned. He promised to take her into town afterward. Rita was also very good at pretending to be sad, which made her an ordinary girl, just like most of the residents in America. As promised, her father took her to town in the evening, where he bought coffee beans, while Rita eagerly gazed at the jewelry. At that moment, the news broadcast came on, announcing that the military had been pushed out of Hawaii and was returning to base in San Francisco. The shopkeeper told her father that he had brought in some rare items the day before, after hearing the news about Hawaii. Her father responded that he was sure the mimics wouldn't attack the town like that, but he was also curious to see what would happen. He continued to talk about how scientists believed the mimics were extraterrestrial, but since there was no way to communicate with them, it seemed the war would drag on until one side was wiped out. The shopkeeper replied that he understood and asked if he could defeat the mimics with jujitsu, something he had once trained in. He laughed at the thought, saying it was something from long ago. Then, the shopkeeper turned to the girl and asked if she was planning to join the military, since she was his daughter. The girl was about to answer but interrupted her father, saying she wouldn't join the military because she liked living in the town. That night, a heavy snowfall blanketed the town, an unusually cold winter night. She woke up to a strange noise and rushed to look out the window. She froze in horror as she saw a giant monster attacking the villagers. She took a step back, and just then, her father broke down the door, hurriedly pulling her away. As they ran out of the house, she witnessed the entire town engulfed in flames, and mimics attacking the people. Her father quickly led her to an underground cellar and told her not to leave, no matter what happened. She looked at her father for a moment, but then noticed her mother lying there, her abdomen torn open with a large wound. She rushed to help her mother, urging her to hold on. Outside the cellar, her father jumped into a car and charged at one of the mimics to take it down. But just then, more mimics attacked him from the side. Hearing the noise, the girl peeked through the cellar window and saw her father trying to draw the mimics' attention, encouraging them to attack him instead of his family. Tears streamed down her face as she watched her father take his last breaths, mumbling that he wanted her to survive. When help arrived some time later, the soldiers found her there. She hurriedly looked back at her mother, only to collapse in despair when she realized her mother had also passed. She just stood there, staring blankly at the corpses of the townspeople. The attack had been carried out by 3 scout mimics, who had burned the town down, killing 15 people. The defense force arrived 3 hours after the attack. She had lost everything in that attack, and a distant relative took her in. At that time, anyone over 18 was eligible to join the defense force. But since she was too young to apply, she stole the passport of a refugee named Rita, who was 3 years older than her, and immediately went straight to the military unit. She had nothing left to live for, and her sole goal was to kill every mimic on the planet. 6 months after joining the military, Rita experienced her first time trapped in a time loop. Whenever the mimics passed through an area, everything became lifeless, and the water turned a murky green. These mimics consumed the earth, drank the water, and emitted a toxic substance harmful to life on Earth but beneficial for extraterrestrial beings. Everyone knew that all living creatures alter their environment by cutting trees and cultivating the land. They thought about creating an ideal environment to build their homes, and eventually, their DNA adapted to the new surroundings. 6 months after joining the United Defense Force, Rita was transferred to a squad full of battle-hardened veterans. One day during the battle, she was injured, and approached by Lieutenant Arthur, who kept the team's spirits up. He briefly spoke to her about the nomads in China mixing animal blood into their tea, and how they conquered most of Asia during the medieval period. Surprised by his story, Rita slowly stood up while Arthur continued, explaining that these nomads were the origin of the vampire rumors. He suddenly asked if she was feeling discouraged by his story. And when Rita reassured him that she was fine, he returned to the battlefield. She watched his figure disappear, realizing he told that little story just to distract her. At that moment, she noticed a strange mimic with an antenna on its back, immediately recognizing it was unlike any mimic she had seen before. Before she could process what was happening, Rita found herself in a bathroom. Panicking, she ran out of the stall, only to realize she still had 30 hours before she needed to return to the battlefield. Though she was only standing there, this was her first loop, which she had gone through after killing the strange mimic. By the second loop, she quickly found the mimic again, determined to see if time truly reset when she killed it. Her suspicion was confirmed when she found herself standing in the bathroom once more. In the third loop, still confused about what was happening, she wondered if this was just a dream. By the 8th loop, she started thinking of ways to escape the cycle. In the 12th loop, she wondered if the first mimic was the key to breaking the loops. But each time she returned, more mimics appeared to protect the special one. In the battle, Rita noticed a soldier lying dead among the group. Which shocked her, he had been alive in the previous loop. Just then, she was attacked by a mimic and found herself back in another loop. Rita realized her 20mm rifle wasn't effective enough, and she would die if she faced all those mimics. Determined to learn more about them, she decided to review any research, rumors, or anything that could give her even the smallest clue. She also wanted to replace her 20mm rifle and went to meet Shasta to discuss it. Shasta informed her that reports showed mimic skin was evolving, and she showed Rita a new prototype weapon, saying it fired stakes. Rita cut her off, insisting she needed a weapon that never ran out of ammo, while thinking about what she really needed, something that could kill all the mimics on the battlefield. At that moment, she received her axe, and began to destroy every mimic in her path. Eventually, she began to understand that the secret behind the mimic's power lay within this loop. This confirmed her theory. The strange mimic was remembering her moves from the previous loop, then reinforcing its guards to stop her in the new one. She realized the mimics were constantly rewinding time to fight humans. Much like hitting the reset button in a video game when you're stuck in a tough situation. This made the battle easier for them. But if they were truly doing this, there had to be some rules governing how it all worked. She was determined to crack this mystery, all while recalling Arthur's soon-to-be-dead face. Rita was resolved to break free from the loop and win the battle. She stood there, watching Arthur as he shared a picture of his newborn child with everyone. The other soldiers congratulated Arthur, telling him he would surely be a great father. Rita mumbled her congratulations too, but she was tired of repeating it every day and had lost count. As everyone continued to praise the photo, she remembered Arthur's dead body and rushed off, gripped by a sharp headache. The pain seemed to worsen with each loop, leaving her confused and wondering if it was connected to the time loop itself. Just then, she came across a report on the mimics, mentioning particles that could move through time. She was still unclear about how the mimics kept looping, lost in her thoughts. Not paying attention to Shasta, she accidentally bumped into her, causing everything in her hands to fall. Rita quickly apologized and reached out to help, but Shasta didn't notice her. Instead, she was anxious about whether the chips had broken. Rita was surprised. This hadn't happened in the previous loop. She asked Shasta if those things were important. Shasta replied they were crucial, as they were external memory units. Seeing Rita's confusion, she explained that these devices were high-tech journals for soldiers, recording every detail, from heart rate to combat strategies. Curious, Rita asked about the purpose of this surveillance, and Shasta responded that everything was stored in the Defense Forces database for strategic planning, helping them with future operations. Rita finally understood that the mimics were doing something similar to these surveillance devices, and she helped Shasta gather the scattered chips. Before leaving, Shasta turned back and called Rita a star, an important soldier. She even had a backup of her data in case the server went down. Rita's eyes lit up when she heard this. She finally realized that the mimic with the antenna was acting as the mimic server, analyzing the situation and rewinding time. If that was true, there had to be a backup mimic recording everything. When she returned after destroying the mimic server, it meant there was still a backup mimic running. She concluded that this must be a mimic network and was incredibly excited to finally find a clue to solve this mystery. Rita realized that she had to destroy the entire mimic network to escape the loop, and to do so, she needed to follow a specific sequence. When she entered the battlefield again, the first step was to destroy the antenna of the mimic server, as it emitted tachyon particles. The second step was to eliminate the backup mimics. And finally, she had to destroy the mimic server itself. Once she completed all the steps, Rita was overjoyed to realize that the loop had ended. However, Her joy quickly faded when she discovered that Arthur had died in battle. She stood still, watching the soldiers mourn by Arthur's body, unable to understand why he had to die in this loop. Rita's heart broke as she blamed herself, feeling she should have realized this earlier. Because she had witnessed this scene before. Having experienced the time loop, Rita understood that she could change the future and save some people, but there were many she could not save. She came to accept that no battle allowed everyone to survive, and concluded that everything ultimately led to death. After the battle in Florida, a top-secret research team was formed to study the time loop. They conducted a detailed analysis of Rita's body, particularly her brain, after going through multiple loops and exposure to tachyon particles. Rita's brain structure had changed. It had all started as an accident, but when Rita first destroyed the Mimic server, her contact with the tachyon particles triggered the time loop. This turned out to be a stroke of luck for both her and humanity. After gaining control over time, she traveled across the world, becoming the only weapon capable of fighting the Mimics. After 211 loops, Rita became stronger. Reaching heights no one else could ever reach. Her only goal was to destroy all the Mimics and bring victory to humanity. To achieve her objective, she kept fighting alone. Standing in the high waiting room of the Flowerline base, she watched the soldiers training, her gaze fixing on Keiji, who was struggling to maintain his stance. This was their first encounter, neither of them aware of the loops the other had experienced. "This is me, just nobody,"